Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be going over different multiple scenarios that could happen within the 2024 presidential election. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. And so guys, we're going to be going over, just some scenarios. We're going to be going over like a narrow Trump victory, narrow Biden victory, what their normal victories would probably look like in the electoral college. And then we're going to go over more extreme scenarios regarding demographics. And so for the first scenario, Donald Trump, if he were to win the electoral college, through a narrow victory, more than likely what would end up happening in a most like let's say, there's a wide range of possibilities for Trump winning, and we're basically going to go over the most, mean option. So like basically the scenario that's most likely to happen, like the middle point. So Illinois would be safe, New York would be safe, the whole northeastern area would pretty much be safe. I'd say Colorado drops under 10. New Mexico is still not under 5. They probably vote within each other. Colorado's like a 9-point win. New Mexico's like a 6-point win in this scenario. I'd expect Texas and Florida to still be likely victories. Florida probably around 8. Texas around 6 or 7 points. Iowa would probably be safe. It would probably be an 11-point win. Ohio, I'd expect it to be a similar victory to Florida in this scenario. Alaska would be safe in this scenario, probably like a 13, 14-point win for the former president. You'd have means first be safe. I'd expect Virginia to be likely. And with the, whole collapse of RFK's campaign due to the whole weird brain tumor type thing, he said that apparently he has a worm in his brain. I'm expecting third party turnout to drop. So that puts Maine and New Hampshire in the likely column for this kind of scenario. And then that would put North Carolina in the lean Republican column. This is a state that Donald Trump, barely won in 2020. He won it by 1.3%. I'd expect him to probably win it by 2 points, 2.5 points, closer to 3 in this scenario. Georgia, I'd expect him to win it by over a point, even in like a median scenario, like a really, really, a most likely scenario. He probably ends up winning that by like a point. I'd even expect him to win Nevada by over a percentage point. This is mainly because Hispanics and African Americans are trending to the right on average, and Nevada's Hispanic population is somewhat seismic to the point where the shifts in Clark County, with both of these demographics, can definitely turn a corner in Nevada. And the same thing for Atlanta, Georgia. That's definitely the shift in African and Hispanic votes. That's definitely going to shift Atlanta as well. And we'll even make some inroads in Pennsylvania, etc. Now, Minnesota and Nebraska is second. I'd probably put him as lean Democrat just because there is going to still be some third party, vote shares. And so I think that that would make it closer, but they'd be closer to likely than even like, 1 or 2 points. Minnesota's probably like a 4-point win, and Nebraska's second, probably 4.5-point win. And then at this point, I'd say, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania would end up being tilt margins for the former president. He has similar victories that he did in 2016, roughly, so to speak. And in Biden, I'd expect him to probably, get Arizona, in a most likely Trump scenario. So like if you were to average out all the possible Trump scenarios, for him to win, this is probably what that would look like. Arizona's interesting because it is trending really left off a cliff, and I would expect him to do relatively well in Arizona. I mean, especially for having an approval rating pretty low. Biden, I think, would do relatively well in Arizona to the point where in a median scenario for Trump, I'd expect Biden to still win it. So that leaves Trump with 301 electoral votes to Biden's 237. Now, for Biden's, scenario of winning the electoral college, it's going to look somewhat similar to that map. However, some of the things are going to look different. You're going to see Iowa and Ohio be under 10 points. They'll be similar victories to 2020. Kansas and South Carolina will still be safe, but they'll be closer to 10 points. Colorado would be a safe margin. New Mexico, I still don't think would be over 10 points just because I think Biden's still going to regress. So I think it'd probably be like a 9 point win in this scenario. Colorado's probably like an 11-point win in the scenario, maybe 12 points in New York, Illinois. Those are still strong. All the Northeast is pretty strong as well. Virginia, I'd expect Virginia to probably vote, over 10 points. I'd expect it to probably be a similar victory to Colorado in the scenario. Maine at large and New Hampshire would both be likely, including Minnesota in the scenario. Alaska would probably fall under 10 points in the scenario. And we're kind of coming up to the swing states here. Texas and Florida would be likely Republican states. You'd have Maine second be likely in the scenario. So you're seeing a similar map to 2020 overall. Nebraska's second would probably be, I'd say it's a lean Dem just because it has been redistricted to be a little bit more Republican. So I'd say it does maybe vote under 5 points possibly. Now, in this scenario, I'd expect Michigan to go lean Democrat. Biden would probably hold on, just to enough, African American support to possibly win. Like if Trump's only getting, 12, 13%, Biden probably still holds on to Michigan. In North Carolina, you'd see a similar victory to 2020. I expect it to be about a 1.8 percentage point victory for Trump. Georgia, I think, would still go to Trump, but I think it'd be pretty competitive. I think Trump probably wins it by like half a point, somewhere within that range. And Arizona would be a pretty easy victory for Biden. He probably ends up winning that by even more than Michigan. He probably wins this by like 2.5 points. Michigan's probably like a point and a half. Pennsylvania, I'd expect it to possibly go tilt Democrat. I think Trump would make some inroads in the Philadelphia, city proper. So I think that pushes the state to the left. I think the same thing for Wisconsin. He probably moves Wisconsin into his column or at least keeps it. It would be a similar victory to 2020, but I think it'd just be a little bit closer than 2020. And Nevada is interesting because I think maybe, okay, Biden probably does win it in a scenario where he wins. He probably ends up picking off Nevada again, just because the state, has historically been voting Democratic for a little bit. And so even though it is trending to the left, I think if Biden does win the election, he probably does get Nevada. I think the only state he probably ends up losing is Georgia, just because Georgia has been historically Republican and it's not trending as far to the left as Arizona, as some people claimed, a couple years back. A lot of us were more black pilled on Georgia than Arizona until, Trump started gaining with African Americans in polling data. Then Trump, we kind of saw a surge there and in terms of optimism, and I'm pretty confident he's going to end up winning Georgia, especially with Brian Kemp passing the law that requires all the absentee ballots to be counted before 8 p.m. That's definitely going to be a big boost in Georgia, and that probably secures Trump's victory in the state of Georgia, believe it or not. That probably ends up securing his victory there. So I'd say Trump probably is guaranteed to even win Georgia as well. And with the voter registration, patterns in Pennsylvania with Republicans gaining when it was the plan to try to get more Democrats to register, you know, that kind of backfired, and African American support's growing for Trump. So if he literally just wins Pennsylvania and Georgia, he's the next president. This could be considered another scenario where theoretically, let's say, Biden somehow holds on to Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada, but does not hold on to Pennsylvania and Georgia. Trump could win the presidency through that path. And so now I'm going to start kind of playing around with the electoral map and kind of start looking at weird scenarios, for both candidates, because there are some, hypothetical crazy scenarios that could occur that it's like, whoa, okay, that might be interesting. And I'm going to go over those right now. And so the first scenario is if Trump kind of just overperforms in the Rust Belt. So like, let's say, Michigan, Pennsylvania, these states end up going like Democrat or something like that. Joe Biden's at 271, right? A crazy scenario that could technically occur is a New Hampshire going Republican. That would be interesting, and it would make sense because New Hampshire's an anti-war state and it has voted to the right of Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin before. I mean, it's done it in recent history, a recent memory back in 2000 when Bush won it, but he didn't win Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. And it's a pretty anti-incumbent state, so that might also push it to the right. The fact that it is a pretty decent anti-war state, and there's a lot of libertarian, vibes here. So even if they don't like Trump, there could be a scenario where, Biden ends up getting Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Trump gets Wisconsin, Nevada, and Georgia, but New Hampshire goes red, and that actually puts Trump on the top. Another state with 4 electoral votes that would be definitely be a shocker to see is the state of Hawaii. The polling actually has it within single digits with third parties. It's within 10 points. The poll has Biden up by 8. Now, am I gonna say that it's gonna flip? Probably not. It's definitely not likely, but realistically, now that we have polls out of there, it is technically considered a battleground state, which is pretty interesting because it's under a 15-point margin in polling, and even under 10 with the third party poll. And so if Trump were to do that, he'd also be able to win there. Another interesting scenario where she could do it, which in this state he's actually polling higher than even some other states, is the state of Maine, where he would tie in the electoral college. That'd be another scenario to look forward to. Another tie scenario is if Biden ends up winning Wisconsin, but ends up losing Arizona and ends up losing Nebraska second. You could see this scenario. And theoretically, this would actually make sense because Georgia, if you look at the polling in Georgia, Trump's up 3.8%. And in the five-way race, he's up by a little bit more. He's up by like 5 points. Arizona, Trump's up 4.7 in the three-way aggregate. And in Nevada, Trump's up 7.5%. And that's well outside the margin of error for all of those states. So if he's outside the margin of error, and the latest poll out of Nebraska second actually has Trump up 3 percentage points there, which would be a bigger win than his 2016 victory. If he just wins those, he's actually already on track to win because this would get sent to the House of Representatives and there'd be a contingent election, and more than likely Trump would prevail in that, just like he would have in 2016 and in 2020. And so this is what it's looking like if Trump ends up tying. And this could theoretically happen. It's not impossible for it to occur. Now, it would be interesting to see the scenario that everybody's been thinking of where Biden does pretty good in the Sun Belt, but for whatever reason, Trump ends up taking the Rust Belt. This is another scenario that I've been kind of looking at. Now, I think it's pretty unlikely that Georgia goes blue, but not Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That doesn't really make sense. However, I would suspect Biden, to probably end up doing pretty good with African Americans, but just not do good with white working class voters at all for this to end up happening. It'd even be funny to see like Minnesota and Nebraska second go red. That'd actually be pretty funny to see like a whole reversion where the Sun Belt goes blue and the Rust Belt kind of mostly goes red. That would be a pretty interesting scenario. Another interesting scenario is that the polling shows that Wisconsin is the best state polling wise for Biden out of the three major states. So it'd be pretty interesting to see, the electoral college be at a point where, this ends up going this way, where Michigan, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina go red, but now Wisconsin and Trump ends up tying in the electoral college. This is also another theoretical tie scenario where Biden wins all these other swing states, but with literally just Pennsylvania, Michigan, and North Carolina, Trump is literally at 269 electoral college votes, which I think is really interesting. And you could see there, here it's the 270 with Georgia and Pennsylvania. The only difference is that you're trading Michigan with Georgia, which is one less electoral vote, and the Nebraska's second electoral vote will get you over the finish line in that scenario. Another scenario that could occur is, let's say Trump ends up doing good in the Sun Belt. He ends up winning, all of the Sun Belt states, but for whatever reason doesn't end up winning any of the Rust Belt states except for Michigan. This is a scenario that could occur depending on the demographics. Like if white voters are trending super left, then Wisconsin, Pennsylvania may go blue. But if the, whole Palestine thing really starts affecting the state of Michigan with the Muslim community and the EV mandate, if Michigan going red before Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, there is a realm of statistical possibility for it from my electoral analysis. And this would be another path for Trump to win the electoral college as well. That'd be another path for him to win. Now, in terms of a Biden landslide scenario, I'd say Biden's best case scenario probably is his 2020 victory. I don't see him winning North Carolina. I think it'd be pretty hard for him to actually win that state. Whereas for Trump, I see that Trump probably could win, most of the traditional swing states. The polling in Minnesota is actually starting to look really good for Trump. In the latest polling, he's actually tied with Biden in a five-way race. And when you only have Mapstead and Jill Stein, Trump's actually up by 5 points on Biden. And in a head-to-head, Trump's actually up by like 2 or 3 points. So let's say he picks up, this state, right? Let's say he picks that up. He picks up Maine at large, and he picks up Nebraska second, and New Hampshire. That puts him at 329 elector votes to 209. And I'd even say maybe even give him New Mexico. Now, Virginia's interesting because I don't know if that would go to him, and I don't even know if New Mexico would go to him. But I'd say this is a pretty realistic, Trump landslide scenario where he basically gets all the swing states and he gets, Minnesota. He'd end up getting New Hampshire, Maine, and Nebraska second. And according to my model, they're all kind of voting in line with each other as of right now, so it wouldn't be a huge shock to see that happen either. And so now, and we're going to go over the scenario from the model, which is quite interesting because all we have to do is kind of look at everybody's approval rating. You see 39.3%. And if we were to find Trump's approval rating, so we'll do Trump RCP favorability, if we look it up, it's probably sitting at around 44.1%. That's where it was sitting at before, but maybe it's changed. Right now, he's sitting at 43% actually, which is pretty interesting. So basically, that puts the popular vote at around a 3.7 plus margin for Trump. So if we go down here, change this to 3.7, we do 3.7 plus 4.5. That's an 8.2 percentage point shift from the previous election. So if you were to plug in the current RCP aggregate with the favorability rating of Biden and this popular vote calculated by the approval ratings, we'll be able to see what we're actually looking at here. And what's interesting is that Trump's actually doing relatively well here. In fact, he's actually winning the Electoral College fairly easily in this scenario. He's actually winning all of these states by completely safe margins, including Texas and Florida. So he's starting off pretty strong here. You'll see he's winning Maine second. He's ended up winning Alaska. So that puts him at 219 electoral votes. You'd see California 17-point win, still Connecticut, Delaware. All these states are still, pretty strong for the incumbent president. New Jersey, we'll look at that because maybe it is closer, which it is. It's actually a likely margin of victory. New York is still strong for the incumbent president. Same thing for Illinois. Illinois, if we actually go there, it's actually only a 5-point win in this scenario. So it is a lot closer than New York is. And if we go to Oregon, for example, we'll see that it's under a likely margin of victory. However, Washington is still over a 10-point win. So that's that. And we go to Colorado. Biden's actually still up slightly over 5 points. Even in the state of Virginia, now Trump is, only down by a couple points. In Hawaii, what's actually funny, I actually have to update the polling here because it's probably going to end up being a lot closer now. So actually, if we go up here and we actually update the polling, we're going to probably end up seeing something really interesting. So let's go to Hawaii and actually update the polling average because it'd probably only be like -8 or whatever. So if we were to look at the margin now, it's dropped it a whole 2 points. It's still safe, but it did drop the margin by quite a substantial amount in the aggregate there. So this is kind of your swing state areas, and if you look at, for example, Wisconsin, all these states are basically pretty much likely Republican. They're very easy victories according to the model. Michigan, 7 points. Georgia, 8 points. Arizona, 8 points. Pennsylvania, 8 points. Wisconsin, Michigan, 7 points. Nevada, 9 points. And if we look at North Carolina, it's an 11-point win. So that's actually in the safe column there. And if we look at the last couple of states here, we're going to look at Maine at large. Maine at large currently has the election as a tilt margin for Biden there. And if we look at Nebraska second, Trump's winning there by a pretty comfortable amount. And now actually we can update the polling out of Nebraska's second there, which is also good too. So if we actually put it to that +3 poll, that it was, his margin actually goes up quite substantially there. New Hampshire is also really close. It's a tilt margin for Biden, and Minnesota was a point victory there as well. Now Minnesota is actually tilt Trump in this scenario alongside the state of New Mexico, with Minnesota actually voting slightly to the right of New Mexico in this scenario. So Trump's actually winning 328 electoral college votes on the current model map based out of right now. And that is what my, Trump landslide scenario was. I kind of just wanted to show you guys because I realized they were pretty similar at that. And this is what my model currently has the election at: Donald Trump at 328 electoral college votes to Joe Biden's 210. And not even to mention that Gold Crown Politics also just released his latest video, and half my model factors in his model that he's used, which he used to get the 2020 election 100% correct. And what's funny is that this result actually matches his current electoral college scenario. Right now, his electoral college scenario for the election is 328 to 210 electoral votes, and my model actually matches what he has right now. That's just kind of something interesting that I thought I'd share with you guys. But that is basically it for this video. If you guys did enjoy the video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, make sure to go ahead and follow the Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And I will see you guys very, very soon.